Hey everybody, Tony D here with a screenwriter's take. Yeah, I know it's been a while on American Badger. I promised you this. I was fortunate enough to be contacted by the publicist of American Badger after I reviewed the trailer, and they gave me a screener's link. Now that's the new thing. Instead of a screener's copy, you get a screener's link. You can go to the website, and I'll watch the whole movie. Doesn't come out to June 15th, but I'm going to review the movie. No spoilers, obviously, since the movie isn't even out yet. I got to be pretty careful. So overall, I think the movie, for an indie film done by one guy, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive. Now, that being said, you can't compare it to, say, John Wick. Although you could compare the stunt work to John Wick. The stunt work, without question, is top tier. I mean, top tier stunt work. I mean, and that makes sense because the lead actor, writer, and director and producer is Kirk, and I hope I'm saying his name right, Coquette. It's French, so I'm not sure I'm quite getting it, but Kirk does a fantastic job overall, I would say. And I would say the top fantastical part of it is the stunt work, and he's a stunt man, is my understanding. So all the stunt scenes are kaboom, explosive and cool. He does some cool things, which I won't give away specifically, but I know when I'm writing scenes like that, action scenes, I like to come up with like, oh, what have I never seen, like, in terms of a guy killing another guy. Like, I try to come up with that, and it's clear that Kirk really thought through the stunts. Now, in terms of the writing, it's very Spartan. Very Spartan. If this was a comic book, it would be one of those comic books with almost no dialogue in it, right? Because there's really very little dialogue in the whole movie. It reminded me a lot of a movie you'd see coming out of the late 70s, where it's very, I shouldn't say slow-paced, it's a leisurely paced movie. There's no one's in any rush here. It's very gritty, and there's almost no dialogue. Like, there are portions of the movie where I'm watching it expecting like a ton of exposition, and like nothing happens. And I'm just like, oh, I'm going to really have to get into these visuals. And that part of it I really appreciated, because if you look at movies from that era, they're saying a lot with the visuals. Does Kirk say a lot with the visuals here? Well, he says some things. I wouldn't say it is as deep as something as like Blow Up or, even The French Connection. But, I mean, there are moments in the movie where you're like, oh, okay. And Kirk, in terms of his acting, is staying in his lane, I would describe it as, because he's not trying to, like, do any more that his acting chops can handle here. A lot of the acting's on the lead actress, Andrea, I cannot say her last name. It's kind of a Russian name, and she's sort of like an Eastern European girl who, I'm not really clear if she's a prostitute or just a webcam girl or both. It's a little unclear. And that was the portion of the movie that I was like really trying to figure out, because as a lot of you know, I'm very much the aficionado of crime movies. And so it's unclear who she is and what the organization that she works for is exactly. Probably Eastern European, kind of Russian mob, Albanian guys who are doing drugs, running girls, the whole nine. But it's not very clear. But then again, it's like, that was kind of the limitations of a low-budget movie. I'm sure some of the stuntmen were reused and covered up. I'm positive they weren't all of a particular ethnic persuasion, which, in a big-budget movie, if you're going to have the triads, for instance, all the triads have to be Chinese. I mean, you can't have an Italian triad and an Irish triad or even a Korean triad. Really, they should all be Chinese. Same thing if you're going to have Yakuza, they have to all be Japanese. If you're going to have Mafia, they all have to be not only Italian, but they all have to be Sicilian. So, and there were a lot of scenes of where, and this is where you really save money on an indie filmmakers, a lot of scenes where there's voiceovers or just music, and without tons and tons of sound, without tons and tons of dialogue, you really can save a ton of money on your movie. I mean, you don't need the sound guy that day. We're just shooting pickups in the apartment. And then the end of the movie is, I wanted it to be different. I was like, oh, I hope it's not just sort of a standard boilerplate kind of ending for this thing. The basic plot is Kirk is a hitman, and he has to get involved with this girl, but the background of his character is he was a soldier, and on his third tour, his wife died of cancer right as he got back, and he didn't even know it, and he found out at the airport, didn't see her before she died. So it's clearly like messed him up. And so for a guy like Kirk, I don't know about his acting range, but in this movie, he's like dead inside, and he's solid on that. I mean, and in some respects, that is an easier thing to play rather than say, oh, I don't know, like James Caan in The Godfather, or someone like that, where you might have to play a range of emotions. Or Al Pacino in The Godfather, probably be more appropriate, where you'd have to play this range of emotions in this transformation. So what happens in the movie, a lot of it is subtext, which is more of a 70s thing. Like, you kind of got to put pieces together by yourself. So in that respect, it's kind of a challenging movie. So for some people, for a modern audience, you might watch it and go, what's happening? I don't know what's happening here. Whatever, it's, I kind of got to respect that they did that. At the same time, I think they ran into some limitations. I think there could have been, the dialogue, it was okay. It wasn't as good as the stunt work. I will say the cinematography is solid, sounds great, all the technical stuff is good. And I would say the stunts are, it's worth seeing for the stunts, I think. In terms of the plot, it's pretty solid. There are moments, though, they say the devil's in the details, and that's what I do as a screenwriter. I think he could have used a screenwriter on this who was more steeped in, I would have been a good guy for this project. I would have asked a lot of questions. I would have said, what's the organization he's working for? What cartel specifically? What area of the world are we in? Let's convey that in the movie. And it would be easy to convey, like, without increasing the budget at all. You convey that it's New York or Toronto or wherever you want it. Although it may have been that he was going for something a little more abstract, that it's the city and it's the crime and it's the crime boss. But I don't know if he was going for that. But that sort of ambiguity in the movie was kind of a strength to it for the most part. And the performances were pretty solid. I would say, though, that if I had to pick the weakness of the movie, it would be that. It would be that I didn't know what the organization was, what their primary motivation beyond money was and crime. I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen that fleshed out just enough. That their primary mode is drugs and they work for the Russians and they're bringing it in from Eastern Europe or whatever. Just a couple of lines would have been icing on the cake. And I get it. Like, he is, and Kirk gets around that by saying his character doesn't want to know who he's working for. Okay. But the bodies do pile high. And so it was like, how could he kill so many people? And as the character acknowledges in the movie, be messy about it and continue to, I don't know, get away with it. there's also a moment in which another character participates in being a hitman, and you're like, well, he's pretty trusting of that person. So, I mean, there are flaws in the movie, but, overall, I got to say I'm really impressed. For a low budget Canadian flick, this was put together well, and as I said, the stunts were just top tier, first class stunts all the way, and they were thrilling to watch, and the rest of it was good to watch too. I mean, it wasn't awful. It was just like I would have liked to have known a little more. I would have liked to have known, how certain characters tie in with each other a little more, and why the ending goes down the way it does. But, for, let's see, it was an hour 20. So you're looking at about 80 minutes, 81 minutes. Just enough. I mean, that is like indie movie, right on the nose. We just got enough footage kind of movie. 80, 85 minutes, like, you got to do that. I mean, really, it's 85, but, I think it was, I think it was like an hour 21. So these days they may be a little more loose with a digital release, but that's close enough, right? I mean, that's a full length movie. If you went and saw an action-packed movie and it ended in 80 minutes, I don't think you'd be screaming for your 5 minutes. And like I said, there's a leisurely pace to the non-action scenes. So there are, a couple of scenes where he's killing a bunch of guys. And again, those scenes are great, but you kind of don't know the context other than, he's a hitman. He didn't want to know who he's working for. Okay. So it's interesting. I got to say, and, and it's just an impressive, I think this is his first film. I mean, it's an impressive first time out. I mean, I've seen first time films and oh my God, they're unwatchable. And this one's very watchable. Very watchable, especially if you like action and you're into the gangster scene. It's, I think most people who are into the genre would like it. If you're into the mafia drama portion of it, there's not a lot of that. I mean, it's organized crime, but they're not drilling down into details of who, what intrigue is happening here. It just kind of happens. And there's a ton of stunt work and a ton of, gunplay, and that gets combined. So that's about all I got to say about it. If I watched it in a movie theater, I think I'd be okay with it, but I'd be a little annoyed if I paid $12 for it. But for a digital release, spot on. Spot on. It kept me entertained. There were a couple of moments that were slow, and, after the first act got going, it slowed down a little bit, and it'll wind up to the two main characters getting together, and because he's assigned as a hitman to look at this girl, and it's like, why would they assign the hitman to do that? Why not just send any gangster to do that? But again, the organization, why they hire him, never really fleshed out. So again, I would go down that road. On a rewrite of this, I would add in a lot more detail, and not even a lot, but just a few lines that would indicate like where he is in the position of the organization and why they would pick him to do something like this. And there's also a doggo in it too. So there's something for everybody. American Badger. So congrats, guys. Good luck with the movie. I hope it does well for you. I assume this is, I think, whatever I said in the trailer. I know it comes out in June 15th. So I assume that's digital download and probably limited release if it's Canadian flick. I'm sure it'll be in Canada. Thanks for sending me the copy. And that's it for me.